There's debt, there's destruction.
Global news impacts us.
We have to change the way we live. This is why we need independent media.
Hello, everyone. Cheers and salutations. Welcome to this very special interview, our first for 2023. We here at Hard Lens Media believe in speaking truth against power, but also working together to form giant coalitions to stand up against the establishment. Before I introduce my guest, I want to give a huge shout out to my co-host. She is, again, the host of Fair and Balanced. She has done a lot of phenomenal work. Farron, welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Glad to be here. I'm excited for these two to come on board. Can't wait.
Absolutely. So without further ado, I want to introduce both of them. This event, it's happening, and I want to pull up this tweet here as well and then bring them on board. So let's first give a proper introduction to what is happening on February 19th. So February 19th, announcing on February 19th, we are going to Washington, D.C. to rage against the war machine. We will rally at the Lincoln Memorial with veterans, speakers, rock bands, and comedians, then march to the White House to demand an end to the billions going to Ukraine. Billions of dollars going to war for the military-industrial complex. This is Rage Against the Machine. Libertarian Party and People's Party, two parties that are political opposites from one another, are working together. Now, I like to see that. That's something I want to see more of. So, joining us here is none other than the chair of the Libertarian Party, Angela McArdle, as well as the chair of the People's Party, Nick Brana. I want to thank both of you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it's
great to be with you, Kit.
Yeah, it's been a while. I know.
Nice to meet you guys.
I know that you two were recently on the Jimmy Dore show, and he had a chance to interview both of you as well. And I feel it's the responsibility of all independent media to promote this and talk about two different parties working together, calling out the ridiculous war that's happening in Ukraine, the billions of dollars that is wasted. So, Angela, we'll start off with you. You're head of the Libertarian Party, and not to be the antagonist here, but libertarians, People's Party, progressive groups calling for the freedom of Julian Assange. Why are you working together? What caused this coalition to happen? Because at least according to the propaganda we're seeing from corporate media, it's impossible for Americans to work together. It's too complicated. There's too many divisions, and then they move on to a cute dog story, and they don't really explain why there's divisions. So, Angela, take it away.
Well, we've come together, I think, to complain in a very epic way about America's legacy of brutality in foreign policy and the escalation that we're seeing in that right now. And also, we have a grievance that trillions of dollars have just been added to the deficit to expend our militaristic empire while the value of the dollar has basically been strangled. There's a small silver lining to all of this, though, that you touched on. While we're teetering on the precipice of nuclear destruction, we found a unifying rallying cry, and we've been able to come together to oppose this war. This is really something that I think transcends the political landscape because it's about the survival of the human race and finding a safe, prosperous future for our children. Economic issues and disagreements about healthcare don't matter if we're all obliterated in nuclear war or nuclear winter. And as dismal as that sounds, we are very invested in coming out alive, coming out in a good way on the other side. And so we've been able to work together, and I think that it's been a fantastic working relationship, and I'm really excited about the work that we're doing.
I'm always, as a journalist, I'm always interested because, everyone truly has a story, and there's a reason why people think the way they do, why they do certain things. I want to start with you, Nick, and then we can move to Angela. What was the moment that you realized you were anti-war? Because if you remember back in 2001, we had these terrorist attack happen. People were signing up like crazy to go overseas, Kit being one of those people going over and fighting for this country. And then, there were people at the time, even including a very minute amount of broadcasters saying, no, we shouldn't go into Iraq. We shouldn't be going over here, and this whole war on terror. And if you were against it, you were anti-American. And then the tide started to turn with some people. I'm interested to know, what was it that kind of woke you up and made you realize you were anti-war? Were you always that, or was there a moment? Give us your story.
You know, my family comes from a country that was actually overthrown by the CIA, and a dictatorship was established there. A
Which
brutal
country?
dictatorship. That's Chile. My family's from Chile,
Wow.
and from 1973 to 1990, it was ruled by General Augusto Pinochet, who was a brutal dictator who killed 30,000 people. His favorite method for killing people was to throw them out of helicopters. He had a stadium in Santiago, the capital of Chile, where he would torture people who had opposed the regime in any way. And of course, that was a CIA-backed coup. And so, with that in my family's history, I've always been opposed to war, but there are moments that have heightened that opposition. And I'll tell you one of them. I was working with John Kerry on his PAC, and also interning in his Senate office in 2012, right before he became Secretary of State. And they had this program at the Pentagon where they would bring over uh, people who were working in the Senate with him, Senate staffers, would go to the Pentagon and they would celebrate the return of veterans from the Afghan and the Iraq wars. And so it was row after row of veteran paraded through the halls of the Pentagon with us standing on the side. And these weren't just any veterans, these were wounded warriors. That's what they called them. Great euphemism, you know.
Mhm.
Missing an arm, a leg, sometimes an eye, sometimes multiple limbs, in wheelchairs, burned, disfigured, the victim of IEDs, all of them the victim of America's endless corporate wars. And I remember being there as each wave of veterans hit. It was a crushing wave of sadness and also of fury. Not just that all of these people had died for nothing, but that this party that I had been told that was supposed to be against war, against the Iraq war, was actively funding the war at every step of the way, pretending to be opposed to the war, but Obama had come in and just continued the war just as George W. Bush had been running it. And that's a moment that I remember that my opposition to war was really heightened. I'll always remember that moment because of the visceral sadness of that moment, but also because of the rage I felt against the Democratic Party in that moment.
And you said you worked for John Kerry. I mean, how did they justify all of this? Do you remember?
Well, the Democrats justify it as saying that we're maintaining America's status in the world. This somehow benefits the American people. That's the biggest lie out there. The empire, the wars, they don't. In the name of war and empire, our civil rights have been taken, our constitutional liberties. We're paying more in gas and food prices. We're killing people abroad. And now we're risking a nuclear war.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do want to actually bring this up here, too. With the Libertarian Party, I think a lot of people at least get the misconception that the Libertarian Party only cares about economics, laissez-faire, hands-off approach. Why would the Libertarian Party be involved in this? Because the thing is, usually we see how the media smears third parties. I mean, let's face it, People's Party, Libertarian Party, Green Party, you know, third parties have to struggle the whole time. Why is this an issue that the Libertarian Party cares about? Because for the most part, all third parties are dismissed, but this is something that's pretty historic where you're seeing a joint coalition of a lot of people. And I have a list of the coalition right here for the Libertarian Party, for groups calling for peace for Ukraine, Liberty Speaks, you got Action for Assange, and so many others. Why is the Libertarian Party getting involved in this?
We've been staunchly opposed to war since the founding of our party in 1971. We are absolutely opposed to American interventionism. We're not isolationist. We think that interaction with foreign nations should be peaceful through trade and diplomacy, but we oppose wars of aggression, and we view things like this proxy war that the United States is raging through NATO. It's just wrong. We have no business doing it. We have no business spending American taxpayer dollars over there. We have no business funding NATO, especially to the degree that we're funding it, getting involved in European and Russian affairs. It's just wrong. And we have taken a lot of grief for our position, and it doesn't matter, right? Because this is the right thing to do. It's the right thing to oppose war, even when it's wildly unpopular. So we're doing it.
What do you think, Angela? And again, also too, I wanted to kick it off as well. If you have a moment that you remember when you realized you were either a libertarian or anti-war, but what do people get wrong about the Libertarian Party? Because I will say this, okay? I have nieces and nephews right now with all of this talk of gender and pronouns and stuff. The new like fad is when kids are like, well, I'm bisexual. And it's like, you don't even know what that means. You're in 8th grade. But there's this new fad of some conservatives where they're like, well, I'm libertarian. And it's like, well, are you? Because you're pro-Ukraine at the same time. Or not that you're pro-war in Ukraine. I correct that. What was kind of your moment, and what do people get wrong about the Libertarian Party, you think?
So people really get wrong about the stereotypical libertarian is like the Monopoly man with his monocle, and his bags of money, and he doesn't care about anyone else. And he's like kicking widows and orphans in the teeth, and it's raining Coke money around him. So we don't get Coke money.
Which sounds a little fun, but then
I wish I had all the Coke money. I don't have the Coke money. I apologize. Our records are public, Hell,
I'll just do it with a monocle. I just want a monocle.
Yeah.
Jeez,
if there's Coke dark money, it has yet to rain down upon me. We are not selfish. We are not, we're also not all objectivists. Everyone thinks that Ayn Rand is, like our mascot. That's not the case. We just believe that human beings thrive and flourish better without government force. So most of us are very active with private charity, things of that nature. We had a big orchestrated effort to help the people in Florida who were suffering from the most recent hurricane disaster. So we do care about people. We just like to do it voluntarily, not with government institutions. Now, so my libertarian moment, so I guess it's sort of a couple, right? I grew up in the South in a fairly traditional conservative home, but my father was a minister with the Christian and Missionary Alliance Church. So I have always been very distrustful of government because we always had missionaries come over from countries that we would send missionaries over into countries where it was illegal to be a Christian. Mostly that was our emphasis. So we would always have people coming back with horror stories about being tortured in gulags in China. I've met people who literally crawled out of Pol Pot's killing fields and were shot and ran across the border and survived. So I have always been very distrustful of government because of that. I would say the real waking point for me with war was September 12th. The day after September 11th, I went up to work, and work closed for me. It was the only government job I've ever had as a teenager. I worked at the tiny little branch library in Chino Hills, and it was right next to City Council. And when I got there September 12th, they were talking about reopening, and there was a flood, just a sea of women in burqas and hijabs out holding candles, and everybody was very nervous. And all I could think was how terrified I was for these people, that they were out there trying to show that they were very upset about what happened. And they that this Islam is not about murdering people in the United States, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And I was just really gripped with fear by what this war and this bloodlust that had been awakened in America was going to do to our country.
And I think if we all look back, just how bad things were, and I think a lot of us were blinded by it. We did not have the power of the internet as we see it with our Library of Alexandria. That's what I call these cell phones now, because the information's at our fingertips, right? All the information of the world is at our fingertips. But, it was common fact. And again, I hate saying this. All the media was saying there are WMDs in Iraq. There are weapons of mass destruction there. We have to do something about Saddam Hussein. Now, we found none, especially in the early stages of the invasion. Then as the occupation was going on, I served in the Marine Corps from 2004, 2008. Obviously, the invasion happened in early 2003. Since then, after 2008, nothing was found. 2012, nothing was found. Afterwards, turns out it was all one big lie. And that's what all these wars have been. Same thing with either that if the U.S. is not involved, then through proxy, militias, such as the destabilization of Libya, where, again, you don't have to like them, but under Gaddafi's rule, there was an open slave trade, which is happening now as we speak. There isn't this ongoing bombardment of what we're seeing in Syria. Now we're seeing, again, unending military funding to Ukraine. Now, I want to be clear to everyone watching here. The actions of Russia and the actions of the United States are deplorable. As soon as any kind of talk of war was happening, everyone should have doubled down on diplomacy. This is a failure of our politicians, and the innocent people that are being hurt are civilians all across the world with this ever rising of inflation. I'd like to get to hear both of your perspectives on the fact that we have money for war, that our politicians are doing this. Have you been getting any kind of pushback from, I guess, quote unquote, authoritative sources from you guys preventing this movement, this rally on February 19th? And I want to get both of your thoughts on the fact that we have politicians on both sides voting for unending funding. Angela, we'll start off with you.
I don't believe I've gotten pushback from any notable sources yet. Certainly plenty of people with Ukrainian flags in their Twitter bio.
Okay.
But, no.
Those are just bots.
Yeah, no big names.
Or they're supporting Blockbuster Video. That was one that I saw with the Blockbuster. It was probably one of the funniest things that I've seen.
Right.
In regards to that.
I think when it comes to money, I think about, like as a libertarian, I don't want the government spending my money, period. But I think about it in the context of war and what's happened in that sort of circle of influence, that sphere over the last 30 years. And I think about the bad situation that the VA is in and all of the scandals that they've had, right? Suicide hotline being hooked up to a 900 sex number. People just getting ghosted, having no treatment. Someone I know died of cancer because his VA waiting list he just ran out of time. They didn't care.
Contributing to the opioid crisis.
Yes. We can't afford that. We can't afford to help those people, the people that we have duped into going overseas and getting blown apart and traumatized on behalf of us, to save us, to protect our freedoms. I don't know what our freedoms are doing over there, but whatever. We can't help those people, but we can spend $1.7 trillion in an omnibus bill. I think it was $858 in the NDAA. We added like a tenth of our national debt over the holiday period. We can dump and pump all of this money into war, but we can't take care of the people that we blew apart with our failed foreign policy. And that is really sad and really shameful.
And not to mention, too, the money in the omnibus bill that has gone to Ukraine now. After all the money that we have given to Ukraine, they now have more of a larger military budget than us and China combined. After all, and that's our money that we've given to them. But Nick, what say you? What do you think?
I mean, we're always told that we're going to fight abroad for our freedoms, and yet somehow these wars are always the justification for taking our freedoms, the justification for increasing censorship, the people who are increased on social media, whether it was before Elon Musk or during Elon Musk, who's another military industrial billionaire. The people censored are always the people opposing war. It was the Patriot Act, the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, mass surveillance. All of these things have been justified in the name of war. So why are we going abroad, spending billions of dollars that could be spent doing anything here? It could be given back to the people. It could be used to end homelessness. It could be used to feed people in this country. There are literally resources going to Ukraine to provide health care and food. And I remember when there was a baby formula shortage, they were sending baby formula to Ukraine while there are babies that didn't have enough to eat here in this country. It's an insane waste of resources. It costs us our freedoms here. It's killing people abroad. And now it's risking the ultimate risk. You showed an article earlier, Kit, about how the chairman, the head of NATO, is warning that this could become a direct war between the US and Russia, and saying that in response, we need to escalate further. We need to escalate harder. We need to keep providing more weapons and doing exactly that, which is making it a direct war between the US and Russia. There was an announcement from the Pentagon just recently that they're going to send more soldiers directly into Ukraine, which is something they started doing in October. They sent the 101st Airborne Division. They placed it in Romania on the border, and they just announced, now we're crossing the border. Okay, we're crossing the border into where this war's happening. And now they're saying, well, now we're also going to send trainers to train the Ukrainians directly, and we're sending them Patriot missile batteries, and we're going to greenlight them striking nuclear air bases hundreds of miles deep into Russia. And so, I mean, when you have people like Henry Kissinger and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the Pentagon, Mark Milley, saying this is getting crazy. Ukraine is not going to win, number one. We need to negotiate right now before this becomes a direct war between the United States and Russia. And you have the neocons, Biden, Blinken, these people in the National Security Council who are pushing as hard as it can, seemingly, for it to become a direct war between the United States and Russia, which I hope I don't have to spell it out for people, but a nuclear war means everybody dies. There's no such thing as winning in nuclear war. There's nuclear winter, kills off agriculture, the food chain collapses, everybody dies. 99% of people, if not everybody, dies. And it wouldn't even matter, frankly, if one country didn't even fire their nukes. All of the soot, millions of tons of soot released by just hundreds of nuclear detonations in the US or Russia, and Russia would also nuke Europe. The US would also nuke China. Everybody, the whole northern hemisphere gets nuked, and just the soot kicked off from one country launching a full-on assault on the other country with nuclear weapons kills everybody because it blocks out the sun, kills agriculture, freezes the ocean, all infrastructure and governments collapse. And yet that's the kind of thing that we're marching towards, because the neocons in this country have no limits whatsoever. And they have this idiotic delusion that the United States is somehow going to become the world's global hegemon, despite the rise of China, Russia, the BRICS nations.
Mm-hmm. I also want to propose two things here, and I want to play a video for all of you, because, again, it's very apropos to what you two are talking about, Nick and Angela. I do want to definitely get a chance for you guys to speak about who is going to be speaking at this event and other members there. But two things to everyone watching this. To what Nick said, there is no winning a nuclear war. All right. If anything, a homework assignment for everyone watching, check out the film Threads. Okay. It is the absolute definition of a horror film, and it's as realistic, at least in my mind, in regards to what will be the aftermath if two countries decide to start launching nukes at each other. I also want to share this video with everyone here too, because you talk about, Nick and Angela, you brought this up here too, and Farron, you've done a phenomenal job bringing up all the hypocrisy in Washington DC and our politicians that are supposed to represent us. AOC, in the months of November, I believe, maybe in October, correct me, I think that's the case for this video, was confronted by two anti-war activists. And throughout this entire time, this person, AOC, who's known as a progressive and a champion for working class issues and anti-war, at least that's how she sold herself, dismisses legitimate criticism and concerns about the ongoing funding for Ukraine. Let's play this video, and this should never be forgotten, because it's the same AOC who said, you got to make these politicians uncomfortable, raise the ruckus. Shout out to Jose Vega. And
Congresswoman, none of this matters unless there's a nuclear war, which you voted to send arms and weapons to Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard, she's left the Democratic Party because there are a bunch of war hawks. Okay, you originally voted, you ran as an outsider, yet you've been voting to start this war in Ukraine. You're voting to start a thermonuclear war with Russia and China. Why are you playing with the lives of American citizens? You're playing with our lives.
There will be no neighbors if there's a nuclear bomb. You voted to mobilize and send money to Ukrainian Nazis. You're a coward. You're a progressive socialist. Where are you against the war mobilization? He's telling the right truth. You have done nothing. Tulsi Gabbard has shown guts where you've shown cowardice. I believed in you, and you became the very thing you sought to fight against. That's what you've become. You are the establishment, and you are the reason why everybody will end up in a nuclear war unless you choose to stand up right now and denounce the Democratic Party. Will you do that? Yes or no? Okay, simple. Are you going to stop nuclear war? Yes or no? There is no line, because this is bullshit. None of this matters if we're all dead. None of it. You know that. Then let's take it up right now, because this is the only thing that matters. This is the only thing that matters right now. We could be in a nuclear war at any minute, and you continue to fund it. That's what's going on. Why not right now?
Being rude.
You're the liar here. Nobody has held you accountable. That's what's happening. And it is time for you to stand up and realize that what you've been saying has been lies. Let your conscience come through for once.
All right. And so.
Wow, that was so rude.
Well, you know, hey, here's the thing. I've interviewed Jose Vega. He's been on the show, I believe 3 times now, and someone who called out AOC. Look, is there going to be a moment during this rally where you're going to be calling out the names of the quote unquote anti-war left politicians who are in Washington, D.C.? Because there are names and people who need to be called out for. Most notably, at least in my perspective, Senator Bernie Sanders, who's turning a blind eye to unending military spending. We have money for war, but there's constant poverty. American people are losing their homes, their apartments. Small businesses are being shut down. We got student debt. We have medical debt. We don't have Medicare for all. Our infrastructure is falling apart. Angela, Nick, are you going to be calling out names of these politicians who said that they're anti-war, said they listen to the people? Are their names going to be dropped?
And let's not forget really quick too, Kit.
Yeah.
If that was a Republican that somebody was yelling at, that would have been fine.
Oh, yeah,
it's just the fact that, you know, it's AOC and, you know, we need to handle her with kid gloves. Sorry to interrupt, but I just had to make that clear.
I think Bernie Sanders call outs is Nick's specialty. So I'll leave those to him. That seems to be like his hobby. I'll probably be going after anybody who feigns conservatism, or, you know, I'll approach it from that angle, but I'll let Nick handle Bernie.
Yeah. It's personal with Bernie and I. It's personal because I gave a year of my life to work for that man, and I really believed in him. I told you guys I was sickened with the Democratic Party working for John Kerry, working for Terry McAuliffe, people like these. Robbie Mook was a part of that campaign. He ended up running the Hillary Clinton campaign. Sickened. And yet,
so then why go work for Bernie?
I gave it one more shot with Bernie. I gave it one more shot. I gave it one more shot. I believed it. I know I was a fool. But
I mean, a lot of people in 2016, to your credit, a lot of people in 2016 thought, okay, he's going to be the game changer. And
he ran 2 campaigns against ending the wars. Even in 2020, he was running against ending the wars. And yet here he is now 2 years later. He apparently has no critique of it. When I confronted him, I'm sure you saw the video, you know, when I confronted him at a rally in Pittsburgh right before the midterms and said, hey, Bernie, why are you funding these wars? Endless billions of dollars to Nazis in Ukraine, marching us towards a 3rd world war. And, you know, and he came up to me of all people, and he said, who's paying you? Who's paying you? Who's paying you? You know,
I don't know. Yeah, we played that video too.
I wanted to tell him, you paid me. You paid me 6 years ago, motherfucker, when we campaigned against war, and now here you are supporting it.
Truth.
Yeah.
Truth.
And here's the one thing that I've noticed with the 4 of us. Okay, like, and I always kind of go back because I wasn't, I guess you could say, like, truth pilled until I started working for a place like RT America. Before that, I was always in local news or national news, and it was very much, you know, the U.S. news and whatnot. When I started working for RT America, I actually worked with more people that were from Colombia and Venezuela and Chile than they were from Russia, mind you. But a lot of them telling me, though, that lived over in Europe, they were like, you don't understand, like, European news is so different. Like, they, and by the way, yes, the clock is 100 seconds to midnight, at least as of 2022. They're still trying to figure out 2023, folks. That's a report that comes out usually every year on New Year's Day, but they're clearly behind. But my European friends were like, you know, we have like a little bit of local news, then we have a lot of foreign policy news, and then we have like your, you know, your cat fashion show. And that's when I realized, like, wow, I could go an entire day in the American news cycle and not know anything about what's going on outside of the United States. Do you think the reason why more people, Americans specifically, are not anti-war because either they don't get it in the media? You always hear that, you know, we're ignorant, but you know, it's what the media is showing us. We're not well read. You know, like again, Kit going over and fighting during this and seeing it firsthand. Angela, you seeing, you know, the women the day after on September 12th and seeing that those are your friends and you're worried. You know, Nick being from a country that was overturned by this country. What do you think it is why more Americans are not like getting on this? Because to me, if they knew, for me to get truth pilled, I still don't understand why the numbers are so low. I really don't.
I also like to add in something. Yes, I did do 2 tours in Iraq. My MOS was 0300 rifleman, all Marine rifleman, by the way. But I am proud to say in both my tours, everyone came home alive and well and in one piece. I did not see heavy combat, even though my job was infantryman. Everyone came home not once but twice, which I think is like the biggest win. Everyone came home alive, one piece. And my other fellow veterans who I do know, many of whom were not lucky. There's a lot of scars that you carry, especially with the aftermath of serving. But folks, look, we got to be better. There's massive amounts of homelessness in this country. I mean, countless veterans have been left on the streets struggling with PTSD, with disability, and so much more. Countless millions of Americans are losing their homes and apartments. Small business owners are losing everything. Our infrastructure is crumbling. It's sickening that it's come to this. I didn't mean to cut you off with this, Farron, but I mean, for me, this hits close to home.
No, and you're so right, because Americans do see these veterans struggling, and you'll see, for example, you turn on Fox News, every other commercial is Wounded Warrior Project or Tunnels to Towers or whatever. Democrats, you know, they'll kind of do it too here and there, they'll pepper it in, but like you see it where they'll show what's happening at home. But again, like I say, like we've all seen something outside of the United States. Do you think that's what the problem is? Are we so ignorant? Is our media keeping us ignorant? What do you think? Angela, let's start with you.
I do think the media keeps us ignorant. I think that the average person has also been sort of conditioned through not just, you know, news media, but just media in general to get burned out on this sort of stuff, to not care, to be very, you know, locally focused, but not in a local community way, like in a just what's right in front of me, what's in front of my face. We chase after the next dopamine hit on social media. We're busy at work. We're not interested in finding out what's actually happening and where our tax dollars go and so on and so forth. And it's really sad. And I think that there's an emotional component too that's very easily manipulated, and people become very fearful to speak out on something like this. And we saw that on lockdowns. It was wildly unpopular to speak out against lockdowns and mandates. I spoke out against it very strongly, and I would often get people would come up and, I agree with you. And they would just whisper it, but they could never speak out. And I see the same thing with the war in Ukraine. I see people coming and saying,
100%,
right? They're afraid of being socially isolated from their friends and family. They're afraid of looking calloused. And so they just lack courage. And we need to have more courage in our culture.
What do you think, Nick? I mean, more and, you know, with all these people that are, you know, it sounds like there is that, I don't want to call it the silent majority because it's not what it is, but, you know, is it that people are ignorant or people don't want to say it? What do you think? Because I'll give you this. I will tell you this, Nick. I mean, hearing your story is insane because a lot of Americans would not know unless they lived through it what a Pinochet helicopter ride was. You know, they wouldn't understand that, or understand that since the 1960s, the United States has been involved in not one, not two, 62 different coups around the world. And you being and growing up in a culture or in a country where that's happened to you, why do you think Americans, what's the deal? Do we not know? Are we ignorant? Are we too dumb? Is it the media? What do you think?
Yeah, and I grew up in the U.S., but that legacy heavily influenced me.
Okay, sorry.
It's definitely the media, a big part of the media. I made the mistake this holiday season of tuning into CNN, which I usually don't do, and I saw.
Why would you do that to yourself? Why?
I know, right? It was a holiday. For days on end, I saw coverage about George Santos, and I saw coverage about Southwest. Like, just every day. It was
Both
the same
lying,
thing.
by the way. Both lying.
Yes.
The most, just the most meaningless thing. I mean, if the media was covering things in proportion to their importance, this might be like one of the bylines that goes at the bottom, you know? And then the story would be NATO chief warns nuclear war. We're approaching nuclear war. Recommended antidote, more weapons to Ukraine. You know, like that would be the kind of thing that would be talking about. Everything Angela mentioned is a part of it too. You know, there's a culture obviously where you don't want to question the authority of this government. I think that's really breaking down though. I think COVID really helped break it down. I think people, it used to be that these labels were much more effective at controlling people, you know, whether it's conspiracy theorist, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist for whatever you believe in, you're a Putin puppet. You know, nowadays, people just don't care about that as much as they do anymore because they're saying, you know what, if I have to choose between your stupid labels and the wars this country's waging endlessly, they say, yeah, label me a dissident. Go ahead. So I think that we are moving in the right direction in that sense. And also, I do think we have to keep in mind that while they don't get any airtime on mainstream media, the majority of Americans actually want to negotiate an end to this war. Yeah. There was a poll done in September that showed that. And it even showed, in fact, that they think that 3 different questions. That was the first. The other is that they think that the U.S. has a leading role to play in the negotiations, which is true because when Ukraine and Russia tried to negotiate a settlement in March, the U.S. and the U.K. sabotaged it because they weren't done, you know, waging the war and trying to give Russia another Afghanistan or their own Vietnam or whatever stupidity it is that, you know, the neocons are focusing on like at the moment. And so, you know, yes, I think that's happening. The third thing that they said was that Americans actually support a negotiated process where Ukraine and the U.S. make concessions in order to end the war. So that's where the people stand. And those are the people that we need to join us on February 19th at the steps of the Lincoln Memorial before these people blow all of us up or before they just keep dragging on this horrific war, you know, till to the last Ukrainian, as they've said is their goal.
And I want, excuse me, Kit.
That's okay.
I just put you in the DM. I want you to show this tweet because this absolutely outraged me. This was 2 days before Christmas, okay?
Oh, boy.
You had a Ukrainian official tweet this out. He eventually deleted it, but I had already screenshotted it. And it was a Ukrainian government official. He's the ambassador. With this tweet, they will stand together as long as it takes, and took the American flag and did this. Okay.
Wow.
Now, at first I was like, okay, let me look at the comments and see what folks are saying. Folks, I saw people on the Democrat and the Republican side completely visceral to seeing this. And then he eventually changed it. Let me see if I can find it. He eventually then changed it. Kid, I'm about to message it to you right now. He changed it to this, and then made it because everyone was like, oh, by the way, nice usage of taking a graphic and putting in your own colors via like Microsoft Paint. Then he redid the tweet and said, oh, this is from the artist so-and-so. And it made it even worse. People, the comments that they said were just like, how dare you? How you dare you take our money? I mean, and folks, I was looking at the profiles and I was like, oh my God, Republican, Democrat, like, oh my God, veterans, mothers, sons, daughters. I mean, when you see it like that, you know, they will stand with us as long as it takes from them,
That's
not
a Biden
us.
quote, by the way.
Oh,
That's
I mean,
a Biden quote.
Yep.
That's what he said with Zelensky standing right next to him. He said, "We're in it as long as it takes." France just said the same thing. You know, and this is what they're This is what they're doing behind the scenes. They're laughing all the way to the bank, and they're laughing all the way to the black market, because we have that study that shows that 70% of the weapons and equipment aren't even getting to Ukraine. They're being funneled off to all kinds of other conflict zones, or just hoarded by the black market. So that's what's really happening.
Nick, there was actually a recent video report in which CBS, I believe it was, they actually did a report on the fact that there are many weapons that are not getting to Ukraine. There's a lack of accountability. And even then, that video itself, CBS had to censor themselves. They had to censor their own reporting. I wanted to pull up these wonderful list of speakers. And Angela, you actually have some breaking news in regards to who else will be speaking. So I want to give you the floor after this. So first, we've got Jimmy Dore from Chicago. What? Who's Jimmy Dore?
Who's Jimmy Dore?
There you go. We got Medea Benjamin.
I used to have Medea on my show all the time on RT. I love her.
We got Scott Horton. Awesome. Scott Horton will also be joining you guys. Garland Nixon. And we got David Swanson as well. However, besides this wonderful list of guest speakers that you have, Angela, you actually told me that this is breaking. Who else will be speaking at this event?
We are also going to have Daniel McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute. He's one of Ron Paul's foreign policy experts, so that's fantastic. And we're going to have Supreme from the Wu-Tang Clan. So
Supreme okay, fantastic. All right.
He is fired up. He is really excited about this, and he's actually very knowledgeable about this conflict, and it's very anti-war. So he's going to be lending like an excellent voice to this event.
Can I tell you my favorite Daniel McAdams story really quick?
Let's hear
Folks, if you don't know him, I used to have him on my show all the time. Such an intelligent, knowledgeable guy. He was the chief of staff for Ron Paul from like beginning to end, basically. And I asked him about Ron goes to Washington in his first day, and he was on the House Armed Services Committee, okay? And Ron gets in there, and he's got all these binders, and we're walking in, and he sits down and he opens the binders and he's looking at everybody like he cannot wait to get started, right? Like he thinks it's like a medical board meeting with him being a doctor, because they actually have to get stuff done in those kinds of meetings. And Daniel said that Ron was like, when are we starting the meeting? And the guy was like, oh, no. We just gab here. We're not going to do anything. And he said that the look on Ron Paul's face, he's like, I have never felt so bad for somebody. He's like, it was almost like telling a kid, you're going to Toys R Us, and then you take him to the dentist. You know, like he said betrayal. He said it was like one of the worst things. And he's like, my heart broke for the guy. He goes, because he was so excited to just get to Washington, work on stuff, and nobody even cared about getting anything done. And here he had done all this homework and wrote reports and stuff. Nothing.
We actually have a comment here in the audience too, and I should have asked this earlier on too. Since this is going to be such a huge event, you've got again a list of great speakers already: Dan McAdams of the Ron Paul Institute, Supreme of the Wu-Tang Clan, Jimmy Dore, Medea Benjamin, Scott Horton, Garland Nixon, David Swanson. But I think what a lot of people want to know is, will this event also be live streamed, and if so, where will it be?
Yes,
also?
hi Kendra.
So can we get that from you guys? Will it be live streamed?
That's the plan.
No, you have to show up. No, just kidding.
Oh, you have to show up. Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm in DC. I will make the trip and I will go live stream it myself. I have no problem.
That's the plan. It'll be live streamed on our socials, and we're working out details of every other place that we could possibly get it live streamed. It'll definitely be live on our Twitter and Facebook feeds.
All right, fantastic. Awesome. All right, that is actually some good stuff. So then that way,
but I do want to emphasize that
go ahead.
If you can at all make it, you should. You need to, because the establishment is watching us. They are seeing how much is the anti-war movement able to organize against us. What of a threat are they? Is there any kind of counterbalancing force in the heart of the empire against these idiotic, endless wars in this Pentagon budget that takes up half the discretionary budget now and consumes everything. So you have to be there. We're going to march to the White House at the end, and you got to be there for that too. So if you can make it, we have to make this stand against the military-industrial complex, because transitions between powers, like we're seeing right now between the U.S. and the rest of the world with other rising economic powers, like we saw between the U.K. and the U.S., they're traditionally marked by wars, like the Second World War. But we can't afford another world war anymore because we have nuclear weapons now.
Now, here's a question for you guys, because I know a lot of people, at least here in DC, having lived here for quite a while. You will get these people where they will say, you know, oh, well, they're a Democrat, I'm Republican. Like, well, I don't believe in, like, you know, I'm anti-war, but like they're Democrats. Let's say, for example, a broken clock is right twice a day. You get somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who actually brought forth a bill to Congress that said, I want an audit of everything that's gone to Ukraine. You have a guy like Matt Gaetz that stood behind her, Tom Massey, a number of different, you know, Tom Massey, I would say, is probably a little bit more libertarian than obviously conservative, the congressman from Kentucky. But like, what if you guys, for example, start getting, quote, the crazy Republicans that agree with you about Ukraine? Are you guys going to kind of be at an arm's length with folks like that? Are you going to welcome them? How do you think you're going to handle people like that? Because I will say, a lot of times it's the fringe left and the fringe right that, you know, people sometimes can be very scared of because they'll get a reputation. How do you guys feel about that?
I would say I'm happy to cultivate a relationship with anyone who opposes this war. I'm going to take Thomas Massey out of my comments here because he's fantastic. But generally speaking, my concern is with people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Kevin McCarthy. Actually, even Kevin McCarthy has spoken out against this war. That's pretty bad when Kevin McCarthy is better on war than AOC. That's really embarrassing. But the problem is that they are still attached to the GOP, and the GOP perpetuates, you know, all of this war on American militarism overseas, and they do it all the time. And this is just one war. There's also the war in Yemen that's still going on. You can read more about that at antiwar.com. The United States is engaged in a regime change in Peru right now. We don't see a lot of vocal, outspoken opposition to that sort of action throughout the GOP. And so I'm happy for people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Kevin McCarthy to attend our rally and be there and be in support. But the stage is for people who are not associated with either of the two major parties, because this is a movement being led by independents, libertarians, and minor parties.
And I think we need to see more of that. And obviously, you guys are still reaching out to a lot of other organizations and groups that will probably, I hope more people will be contributing to this, because this is something that impacts us all. I want to read your demands, and I'm going to ask you two last final questions, and then we will be wrapping up because we are running short on time. Your demands for the Rage Against the War Machine and the group that makes part of your entire coalition: not one more penny for war in Ukraine, negotiate peace, stop the war inflation, disband NATO, global nuclear de-escalation / the Pentagon budget, abolish the CIA and military-industrial deep state, abolish war and empire, restore civil liberties, and finally, I think the most important one right here, again, for free speech, free Julian Assange. So as a final note,
and mind you, demand's not that difficult.
Yeah, it
could end tomorrow.
Yeah, demand could be
could
free
end tomorrow.
So besides this main website, which is, again, Rage Against the War Machine, Angela, Nick, if people want to follow you and support you guys online, where else can they go? Because obviously there's a Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram link for Rage Against the War Machine, but where else can people follow you online and for social media too?
You can find me on Twitter at Angela4LNC Chair. If you're interested in the Libertarian Party, you can go to lp.org. If you want to see more about the personal work that I do to get the party into the shape that it's in and other resources, you can go to patreon.com/Angela McArdle.
All right. And then Nick.
And you can find us at peoplesparty.org, peoplesparty_US on Twitter. On our website, you can find all our social media, and of course, rageagainstwar.com. Go sign up, join us, be there. Let's do this. Let's shut down this military industrial deep state that controls everything.
And I think it's very important also to note that it's going to be gathering at the Lincoln Memorial, February 19th, a place where many people that promoted peace, MLK, a lot of different people during those war times also were calling for an anti-war effort. So there is a historical significance, I think, in that as well, that I wanted to point it out.
Absolutely. So obviously, Angela, Nick, Farron, first of all, I want to thank all of you so much for joining me in this conversation. I want to give a huge shout out to everyone else that's been supporting us as well. We actually got a Rockfin chip from Cyril O'Reilly. Thank you so much, as well as a Rockfin tip from Roger Meadows, who is encouraging for people to support Rockfin over Rumble, because Rockfin's a worker co-op. So there you go. Rockfin is an outstanding platform for people to use, and I like all alternative platforms. But I also want to say folks, everyone that's watching this, again, Rage Against the War Machine at the Lincoln Memorial, February 19th. Libertarian Party.
I put the link in the chat of where to donate as well. If you can't make it, donate.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And again, you have the Libertarian Party, People's Party, Punk Rock Libertarians, World Beyond War, the Mrs. Causes, Peace in Ukraine, Liberty Speaks, Radical Caucus, Action for Assange. Look, 47 days. More groups and people need to get involved in this and start stepping up. Angela, Nick, you two are outstanding individuals for actually putting aside differences and actually wanting to fight for a better future. I'm all for that. So with that being said, folks, I hope all of you can at least make it, or either join in and share on the live stream that's going to be happening on February 19th. Until then, folks, peace to you guys, and let us all do what we can to build a better future. Take care, folks.